Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take complex material, pull out the key insights, and basically give you the shortcut to being really well informed on the stories shaping our world. Before we dive in, though, a quick word from our sponsor. This Deep Dive is sponsored by Stonefly. They're a leader in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. So if you're looking for secure ransomware-proof storage, well, Stonefly sells air-gap and immutable storage. You can contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo. Okay, so today we are peering inside one of the world's most secretive and, let's face it, successful organizations, Apple. We're looking at something pretty unavoidable, a kind of generational event happening there, the big wave of executive retirements. And we're analyzing what this massive leadership turnover actually means for their famous culture of secrecy, their product roadmap, and, crucially, their ability to dominate the next decade, especially with AI.
Yeah, and this isn't just, standard corporate churn, not at all. We are looking at the natural end, really, of the Tim Cook era. You've got this core group of leaders, many who've been there since Steve Jobs came back, and they're all kind of approaching retirement around the same time. The material we've looked at really outlines the specific timeline, the key players involved, and why this shift, which looks like it'll really hit by 2030, carries, enormous stakes for a company valued at $3 trillion.
Okay, let's unpack this then. An entire generation of leadership potentially leaving. What's the immediate timeline look like for this big change? How concentrated is this wave we're talking about?
Well, the estimation is it's pretty stark, actually. Potentially half the faces you see on Apple's executive leadership page could be gone within 5 years. So starting from, say, late 2025.
Wow, half.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem like it's designed as a slow sequential handover. It feels more like a concentrated demographic event. And that's going to put immense pressure on their succession plan, obviously.
And these aren't just, names on an org chart. These are the operational heavy hitters, right? Who specifically are we talking about? Who are the figures approaching or maybe even past that retirement age?
The main trio, the ones we really need to focus on, are Chief Operating Officer Jeff Williams, Chief Financial Officer Luca Maestri, and of course, Tim Cook himself. He's 64 now.
Right.
These are the veterans, the ones who really embedded how Apple operated so efficiently after Jobs. Williams basically owns the supply chain, Maestri, the global financial structure, and Cook, well, he's maintained the whole culture.
I wonder if the deeper story here is less about just age and more about the natural evolution of this tech giant. I mean, they've relied on this incredibly tight-knit, almost invisible group for so long. So when you think about the scale of it, this concentration of exits by the end of the decade, it really forces you to ask, are the new leaders inheriting a smooth runway, or is it more like a moment of potential crisis?
That is exactly the critical tension. We move from the who and when to the why it matters now.
Right. And here's where the strategic implications really start to hit that timeline. Why is this leadership change happening in such a, pivotal moment in the wider tech world?
It's landing right in the middle of this furious acceleration of competition, particularly in, artificial intelligence and also next-gen consumer electronics. Now, Apple has traditionally been brilliant at managing transitions, but this specific one, it risks disrupting the stability that's always underpinned their meticulously planned product pipeline.
Everything from the iPhone updates we expect
to these huge emerging AI initiatives they must have in the works.
Yeah, and the material mentioned this fear, the loss of institutional knowledge. Let's dig into that a bit. When we talk about the unique genius of people like Williams and Maestri, what specific operational knowledge might be lost or slowed down? The kind of stuff that's maybe irreplaceable.
This is where you see just how deep their operations run. The analysis points specifically to two absolutely mission-critical areas: chip design and global supply chains. Think about Jeff Williams. He didn't just manage the supply chain, he helped build the whole complex web. Often politically tricky relationships with global partners, the stuff that ensures Apple can manufacture at a scale and cost basically no competitor can touch. Losing that depth of operational expertise, it risks slowing down that crucial rhythm of decision-making, big time.
And looking at Maestri in finance, the challenge is similar, right?
Yeah.
Maybe less visible to us on the outside, but just as critical.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just balancing the books. It's navigating incredibly complex global tax structures, figuring out how to deploy that massive cash reserve effectively. Maestri's time there involved some really sophisticated financial engineering that shaped Apple's huge wealth structure. A new CFO, no matter how brilliant, just takes time to get their head around those highly sensitive global arrangements.
Yeah, that's it.
And any friction there, any perceived wobble could impact investor confidence. confidence, even if the products themselves are still flying off the shelves.
This loss of an era. It does remind me of Joni Ive leaving back in 2019. That was one big departure focused on design, but it signaled a kind of culture shift. Now we're looking at simultaneous exits across operations, finance, and the CEO chair, which makes the internal bench, the whole succession plan, maybe the most important product Apple has right now, internally at least.
So who is being talked about? Who's potentially being groomed for when Cook eventually steps down?
Well, as you'd expect with Apple, the succession plan is famously opaque. That's just how they operate, standard procedure. But the reports do highlight a couple of internal contenders who are already very visible. You've got John Ternus, who leads hardware engineering.
Okay, the hardware guy.
And Eddy Cue, who heads up services.
Services. Those names alone represent a really fascinating potential divergence, don't they? Ternus is like the traditional core strength, hardware excellence, making the physical things.
Yeah.
Q, though, represents that huge growth area, the dominance of services, recurring revenue. Exactly right. And you can bet investors are watching that very, very closely. Because the choice between them, or maybe they even go for an external candidate, who knows, that choice will signal the company's strategic priority for the next decade.
Right. We'll be doubling down on the physical innovation routes or really accelerating that focus on the services engine.
And we should remember, it's not just the C-suite in flux. The board of directors faces changes too, mandatory ones in some cases. Directors like the former Boeing CEO James Bell, he is approaching Apple's informal retirement threshold of 75.
So the strategic guidance, the oversight from the very top, that's also needing fresh perspectives, just as the CEO choice is looming. That feels like, well, it compounds the issue, doesn't it?
It really does. The material we looked at predicts they'll need new board appointments by 2026. And since the board is ultimately responsible for picking the next CEO, well, this dynamic puts that opaque succession planning under intense, time-sensitive scrutiny.
Because the new board members will help shape the criteria for who they pick. Now, Apple's always faced regulatory scrutiny, hasn't it? Why are these external pressures particularly complicating this handover right now?
I think it's the pace and the nature of it. The regulatory landscape seems to be evolving faster than ever. The pressures now include really intensifying global scrutiny over competition, sure, but also fundamental issues like data access and privacy. The material specifically mentioned the UK government's renewed push for iCloud access. That's a direct challenge to Apple's core privacy stance.
Yeah, navigating that tension, being compliant versus maintaining that reputation as a privacy fortress. That's a monumental task for any leader. A new CEO isn't just inheriting a product pipeline, they're inheriting an active global legal battlefront.
Exactly. And it requires a leadership team that can communicate nuance really well, maintain internal alignment on these supercharged issues, which is tough enough for an established team, let alone a new leader stepping into that role potentially for the first time. The pressure's on the new talent to be incredibly diplomatic and legally sharp, basically from day one.
Okay, so bringing it all together, what does this whole generational shift actually mean for the market, for investors? Are they currently pricing in this potential instability, do you think? Or are they just focused on the quarterly results, the iPhone sales?
Well, investors are certainly watching the leadership stability question. They see it as key to sustaining that long-term growth, no doubt. However, you're right, the short-term focus does remain very much on product performance. And we've seen resilience there. The stock did bounce back in late 2025, didn't it, after the iPhone 17 launch proved successful. Plus, the anticipation around upcoming products, like maybe an M5 iPad Pro, that provides a kind of product-driven buffer against the leadership uncertainty.
So the product strength is kind of insulating them, for now at least, from the inherent risk of this potential leadership vacuum. It's that classic risk balanced with opportunity scenario. How does this leadership refresh, potentially inject new energy? What's the upside for their long-term strategy?
Well, the ultimate hope, I suppose, is that new blood could really invigorate the company, especially injecting some necessary new energy into their AI ambitions, which are becoming more and more important.
Yeah.
And into the broader product ecosystem, too. You know, the veterans brought incredible stability and operational efficiency, but maybe a new leader brings a necessary injection of risk-taking, a fresh vision, the kind you need to compete head-on with rivals in the AI race.
It's a balancing act, then.
Absolutely. The company has to maintain that crucial balance, honoring the heritage built by Cook, Williams, Maestri, that whole culture of secrecy and meticulous execution, while also finding the forward momentum needed to stay the world's most valuable brand and redefine itself for this coming age of ambient computing, AI everywhere.
Okay, so let me try and synthesize the key points for you, the listener. Apple faces this really critical wave of executive departures, likely peaking by 2030. We're talking core figures: Cook, Williams, Maestri. And this huge turnover is happening just as competition, especially in AI, heats up significantly. That risks losing irreplaceable institutional knowledge, the deep stuff about chip design, those complex global supply chains. Secession contenders seem to be Ternus, the hardware guy, and Cue, the services guy. But the big challenge is maintaining momentum, keeping that unique Apple culture, while also replacing keyboard members and navigating some really intense external regulatory pressure, like that renewed UK push for iCloud access. It's a lot.
It really is. And it raises, I think, an important final question for you to think about. Given Apple's historic emphasis on continuity, on hyper-secrecy around its product development, when a company built like that undergoes this level of simultaneous top-down change, does the process of the executive transition itself inevitably become the next major product? The thing that investors and analysts start scrutinizing, maybe even more closely than the iPhone 18?
Wow, that is a phenomenal thought to end on, whether the transition itself becomes the next big market event for Apple. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the future of Apple leadership. And once again, this deep dive was sponsored by Stonefly. They're leaders in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. If you are looking for secure ransomware-proof storage, remember Stonefly sells air-gapped and immutable storage. You can contact sales@stonefly.com to schedule that demo.